Hello, Mina Kaja here, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will be going over the Codex entries that I obtained in Ostagar, the Korcari Wilds and Lothering. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss other videos like this. Without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, starting off under creatures, we have Genlock Emissaries. The most intelligent of the alphas become gifted sorcerers with many abilities akin to blood magic. These are the emissaries, and they usually only appear during a blight. Hurlock. Taller than their Genlock cousins, the Hurlocks are roughly of human size, but are possessed of considerable strength and constitution. The shock troop of the Darkspawn, a single berserking Hurlock, can often be a match for numerous opponents at once. They are known to adorn themselves with roughly carved tattoos to keep track of their kills and deeds, though it is unknown whether or not there is a uniform standard to these markings. Alphas. Alpha Hurlocks are more intelligent and more skilled fighters, often serving as commanders or even generals. Emissaries. Hurlock emissaries have also been known to appear during a blight. These Darkspawn are the only ones recorded as being capable of human speech and are often capable of employing magic. Mabari Warhound. Dogs are an essential part of Ferelden culture, and no dog is more prized than the Mabari. The breed is as old as myth, said to have been bred from the wolves who served Dane. Prized for their intelligence and loyalty, these dogs are more than mere weapons or status symbols. The hounds choose their masters and pair with them for life. To be the master of a Mabari anywhere in Ferelden is to be recognized instantly as a person of worth. The Mabari are an essential part of Ferelden military strategy. Trained hounds can easily pull knights from horseback or break lines of pikemen, and the sight and sound of a wave of war dogs howling and snarling has been known to cause panic among even the most hardened infantry soldiers. Ogre. Towering over their Darkspawn kin, the massive ogres are a rare sight on the battlefield. Traditionally, they only appear during a blight, but some records claim that ogres have been spotted in the deep roads hunting alone or in small groups. At least one report by the Grey Wardens claims that an ogre was spotted alone in the Korcari Wilds in 919 Dragon, though it was weakened and easily dispatched. Up to 100 of these creatures can accompany a Darkspawn horde at any one time during a blight, often using their great strength to burst through fortifications and demolish the front lines of the opposing army. They use brute force to charge their enemies like bulls, slam the ground with their fists to shake enemies off their feet, and hurl giant rocks into the face of oncoming foes. Melee can be difficult against a giant that snatches a warrior up in one hand, crushing the life out of him or beating him into oblivion with the other hand. The nimble can try to wiggle his way free, or an ally can attempt an array of stunning blows on an ogre to free the comrade in danger. Grey Warden lore urges caution when slaying an ogre. Unless it is ensured that they have received a major wound to the head or the heart, it is possible that they are lying dormant and will regenerate to a full health within a matter of minutes. During a blight, most Grey Wardens recommend burning all Darkspawn to ashes, dead ogres in particular. Shade. It has often been suggested that the only way for a demon to affect the world of the living is by possessing a living, or once living, body, but this is not always true. Indeed, a shade is one such creature, a demon in its true form that has adapted to affect the world around it. My hypothesis is this. We already know that many demons become confused when they pass through the veil into our world. They are unable to tell the living from the dead, the very static nature of our universe being confusing to a creature that is accustomed to a physicality defined entirely by emotion and memory. Most demons seek to immediately seize upon anything they perceive as life, jealously attempting to possess it. But what of those that do not? What of those that encounter no life or fail to possess a body? What of those that are more cautious by their nature? These demons watch. They lurk. They envy. In time, such a demon will learn to drain energy from the psyche of those it encounters, just as it did in the Fade. Once it is drained enough, it has the power to manifest and will forever after be known as a shade. Such a creature spurns possession. It instead floats as a shadow across its piece of land, preying upon the psyche of anyone who crosses its path. Perhaps it believes itself still in the Fade. There's evidence to believe this is so. A shade will weaken the living by its very proximity. If it focuses its will, it can drain a single target very quickly. Some have even been known to assault the minds of a living victim, causing confusion or horror and making the target ripe for the kill. The tragedy of a shade is perhaps that once it has drained a target whole, its appetite is only heightened rather than slaked. From the journal of former senior enchanter Malleus, once of the Circle of Ravane, declared apostate in 920 Dragon Age. Wolf. It is rather unfair, the reputation that the wolf possesses in Ferelden. For a people that so clearly adore their hounds, Fereldans simultaneously harbor a distrust of wolves that borders on the unreasonable. Unreasonable, that is, if one were not familiar with the ancient legends regarding werewolves. There was a time in Ferelden's past when demons inhabited the bodies of wolves in great numbers, causing the wars against werewolves and spreading great fear and panic. The werewolves were slain, but even today the noble wolf is still looked upon with distrust. From Legends of Ferelden, by Mother Aelis of Denerim, 910 Dragon. An attack by wolves upon civilized folk happens rarely, often only in times of desperation, and even then only when the wolves have the advantage of numbers. This can change during a blight. When darkspawn rise onto the surface, their presence dramatically alters the savage nature of normal beasts. In blights past, as the corruption of the darkspawn spread through the wilder areas of Thedas, it would infect the animals found there, and the more powerful of them would survive and be transformed into a more vicious and dangerous beast. A blight wolf is one such example, mad with the pain of its infection, and only through the overriding command of the darkspawn does it still retain some semblance of its pack instincts. Blight wolves are always found in large groups and will tend to overwhelm a single target if they can, using their numbers to their advantage. It is fortunate that these creatures rarely survive their corruption for very long. Items. Havard's Aegis. Havard was Maferath's closest friend. They were children together in the same Avar clan. They fought side by side in so many battles that Maferath dubbed him Havard the Aegis, better to have at his side than any shield. Maferath brought Havard with him to meet with the Teventers. It was unthinkable to stand before his enemies without his Aegis. When he understood that Maferath was giving Andraste over to be executed, Havard, unwilling to draw swords against his friend and liege, placed himself between Andraste and the Teventer soldiers. The Teventers struck him down, and Maferath left him for dead. But Aegis was not so easily destroyed. Havard lived, and made his way gravely wounded to the gates of Minrathous to stop the execution. Too late. He found only the ashes of the prophet, left to the wind and rain. When his fingers touched the ash, his ears filled with song, and he saw a vision of Andraste, dressed in cloth of starlight. She knelt at his side, saying, "Rise, Aegis of the faith, the Maker shall never forget you so long as I remember." His wounds healed instantly, and with new strength, Havard gathered up Andraste's remains and carried them safely back to the lands of the Alamari. Magic and Religion. The Chant of Light, the Blight. No matter their power, their triumphs, the mage lords of Teventer were men, and doomed to die. Then a voice whispered within their hearts, "Shall you surrender your power to time like beasts of the fields? You are the lords of the earth. Go forth to claim the empty throne of heaven and be gods." In secret they worked, magic upon magic. All their power and all their vanity they turned against the veil, until at last it gave way. Above them a river of light, before them the throne of heaven, waiting. Beneath their feet the footprints of the Maker, and all around them echoed a vast silence. But when they took a single step towards the empty throne, a great voice cried out, shaking the very foundations of heaven and earth, "And so is the golden city blackened. With each step you take in my hall, marvel at perfection, for it is fleeting. You have brought sin to heaven and doom upon all the world." Violently were they cast down, for no mortal may walk bodily in the realm of dreams, bearing the mark of their crime, bodies so maimed and distorted that none should see them and know them for men. Deep into the earth they fled, away from the light. In darkness eternal they searched for those who had goaded them on, until at last they found their prize, their god, their betrayer, the sleeping dragon Dumont. Their taint twisted even the false god, and the whisperer awoke at last, in pain and horror, and led them to wreak havoc upon all the nations of the world. The first blight. From Threnodies 8. The Tranquil. The Tranquil are the least understood but most visible members of the Circle. Every city of respectable size boasts a circle of magi shop, and every one of these shops is run by a Tranquil proprietor. The name is a misnomer, for they are not tranquil at all. Rather, they are like inanimate objects that speak. If a table wished to sell you an enchanted penknife, it could pass as one of these people. Their eyes are expressionless, their voices monotone. Incomparable craftsmen they might be, but they are hardly the sort of mages to put ordinary folk at ease. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. Okay. Ostagar. Representing the furthest point of encroachment by the ancient Tevinter Imperium into the barbarian lands of the southeast, the fortress of Ostagar was once one of the most important defensive holdings south of the Waking Sea. It stood at the edge of the Korcari Wilds, watching for any sign of invasion by the barbarians known today as the Chastened Wilders. Straddling a narrow pass in the hills, the fortress needed to be bypassed to reach the fertile lowlands to the north, and proved to be exceedingly difficult for the Wilders to attack because of its naturally defensible position. Like most imperial holdings in the south, Ostagar was abandoned after Tevinter's collapse during the First Blight. It was successfully sacked by the Chastened Wilders, and then, as the Chastened threat dwindled following the creation of the modern Ferelden nation, fell to ruin completely. It has remained unmanned for 4 centuries, though most of the walls still stand, as does the tall Tower of Ishal, named after the great archon that ordered its construction. Ostagar remains a testament to the magical power of the Imperium that created it. From Ferelden Folklore and History, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. The Korcari Wilds. It is said that in the midst of the Black Age, when werewolves stalked the lands of Ferelden in numbers that kept every farmholder indoors and a hound on every doorstep, a powerful Arl of the Alamari peoples stood and declared that he would put an end to the threat. His Arling stood on the border of the dark forest on the southern border of the Ferelden Valley, and he claimed that the werewolves used the forest to launch their midnight assault on humanity. For 20 years this Arl led an army of warriors and hounds deep into the forest. In his hunt for the werewolves, he slew not only every wolf he came upon, but also every member of the Chastened Wilder folk. Any one of them, he said, could harbor a demon inside, and thus be a werewolf in disguise. For 20 years the forest rang with screams, and the rivers ran red. The tales say that an old chastened woman found her sons all dead at the Arl's blades. She pulled one of those very blades from one son's heart, and plunged it into her own chest, cursing the Arl's name as she did so. Where her blood touched the ground, a mist began to rise. It spread and spread until it was everywhere in the forest. The Arl's army became lost, and it is said that they died there. Others say they wander still. The ruins of his Arling stand to this day, filled with the ghosts of women waiting eternally for their husbands to return. The forest of legend is, of course, the Korcari Wilds. There are as many legends about the great southern forest as there are shadows, or so the saying goes. The Chastened Wilder folk have made their home there since mankind first came to these lands, and the wild lands spread as far into the south as anyone has ventured. Beyond the mists are vast tracts of snow, white-capped mountains, and entire fields of ice. It is a land too cold for mankind to survive, yet the Chastened eke out an existence even there, and they tell of horrors beyond the wilds that the lowland folk could not begin to comprehend. To most, Ferelden simply ends with the Korcari Wilds. There is nothing beyond. The wilds is a land of great trees, wet marshes, and dangerous monsters. What more need be said? From Land of the Wilders by Mother Aelis, Chantry Scholar, 918 Dragon. Characters. Alistair. You know, one good thing about the Blight is how it brings people together. Alistair was a novice Templar when Duncan recruited him into the Grey Wardens, or rescued him, as Alistair would say. His mother was a serving girl who died when Alistair was very young. He was raised by Eamon Gwerin, Earl of Redcliffe, for a time. Queen Honora. We have been given the gift of freedom by our forebears. Let us not squander it. The only child of the war hero Logain MacTair, Honora has never been one to stay quietly in the background. It is common knowledge that in the 5 years Honora and Kaelin held the throne together, she was the one wielding the power. She is held in much higher esteem than her husband by the people of Ferelden, nobility and commoners alike, and commands the respect even of foreign nations, having once inspired Empress Celine of Orlais to declare, Honora of Ferelden is a solitary rose among brambles. King Kaelin Therin. I'd hoped for a war like in the tales, a king riding with the fabled Grey Wardens against a tainted god. Son of the legendary King Merrick Therin, Kaelin was the first Ferelden king born into a land free from foreign rule in 2 generations. Since his father's death, he's held the throne alongside his queen Anora. He fell in battle alongside Duncan at Ostagar. Sir Cothrine. Some of us know what honor and loyalty are. Cothrine came to Logain's service the hard way. She belonged to a poor family and was out doing work on the farm when she saw a man on horseback being attacked by several bandits. She rushed to his assistance and found out belatedly that the man she saved was none other than the great hero Logain. Though she was hardly more than a child, he took her in, offering her a position with his soldiers, and she climbed through the ranks through sheer determination. Becoming the commander of Merrick's shield, Logain's elite soldiers, was the proudest moment of her life. Thanatos. The Mabari is clever enough to speak and wise enough to know not to. Ferelden proverb. Mina found this Mabari in the camp at Ostagar. His master was killed in the wilds, and Thanatos fell ill from biting the darkspawn in battle. Thanatos seems to have chosen Mina as his new master now, seeking Mina out after the Battle of Ostagar and warning of an impending darkspawn attack. Duncan's entry has been updated. He was killed in battle against overwhelming numbers of darkspawn at Ostagar alongside King Kaelin. Arl Eamon Gwerin. Nobility does not exist without obligation. We owe all we have, even our lives, to our land and our people. As the maternal uncle of King Kaelin, Arl Eamon is one of the king's most trusted advisors. Redcliffe, while not a large or especially wealthy part of Ferelden, is a critical strategic location. The fortress guards the western pass that leads to Orlais, as well as the major trade route with Orzammar. A well-respected man, though not the most charismatic, King Kaelin once said of him, "My Uncle Eamon is a man everyone thinks well of, when they remember to think of him at all." Flemeth. You are required to do nothing, least of all believe. Ages ago, legend says Ban Conobar took to wife a beautiful young woman who harbored a secret talent for magic, Flemeth of Highever, and for a time they lived happily until the arrival of a young poet, Osen, who captured the lady's heart with his verse. They turned to the chastened tribes for help and hid from Conobar's wrath in the wilds until word came to them that Conobar lay dying. His last wish was to see Flemeth's face one final time. The lovers returned, but it was a trap. Conobar killed Osen and imprisoned Flemeth in the highest tower of the castle. In grief and rage, Flemeth worked a spell to summon a spirit into this world to wreak vengeance upon her husband. Vengeance she received, but not as she planned. The spirit took possession of her, turning Flemeth into an abomination. A twisted, maddened creature, she slaughtered Conobar and all his men and fled back into the wilds. For 100 years Flemeth plotted, stealing men from the chastened to sire monstrous daughters, horrific things that could kill a man with fear. These Korcari witches led an army of chastened from the wilds to strike at the Alamari tribes. They were defeated by the hero Cormac, and all the witches burned, so they say, but even now the wilders whisper that Flemeth lives on in the marsh, and she and her daughters steal those men who come too near. Morrigan's mother saved the last Grey Wardens from death atop the Tower of Ashal, but just who or what Flemeth truly is a mystery. Logain Mac Tyr. Understand this. I will brook no threat to this nation, from you or anyone. Logain was born a farmer during a time when his country was under foreign occupation. When he was still a boy, he joined the resistance, where his considerable tactical genius quickly became apparent. He became close friends with Prince Merrick, the last true heir to the Ferelden throne, and together they led the rebels to drive out the forces of the Orlesian Empire. Merrick raised his friend to the nobility, and Logain is now more of a symbol than a man. He represents the Ferelden ideals of hard work and independence. During the battle at Ostagar, he fled the field, leaving King Kaelin and the Grey Wardens to die. He then returned to Denerim and declared himself the regent to his daughter, Queen Anora, demanding that Ferelden follow him against the Darkspawn, upsetting a great many of the bands. Morgan. Witch of the Wilds? Such idle fancies, those legends. Have you no minds of your own? Of herself, Morrigan says little. She does not deny being a witch of the wilds, but beyond that, everything about her is in question. Her mother claims to be Flemeth. If that's true, the Morrigan might well be a very powerful witch. for the tales of the daughters of Plymouth tell of twisted, monstrous women who can kill a man with fear. She was made to accompany the surviving Grey Wardens. The payment, Plymouth said, for saving their lives at the Tower of Ishal. Ban Tegan Gwerin. The Banorn will not bow to you simply because you demand it. Younger brother to Arl Lehman of Redcliffe and uncle to King Caelan, Tegan holds the Banorn of Rainsphere, a tiny province of red cliffs squeezed between the Frostback Mountains and Lake Calenad. Ban Tegan avoids the Denerim court except to go hunting with his nephew and rarely makes himself heard at the Landsmeet, preferring to leave politics to his brother. Wyn. I will not lie motionless in a bed, with coverlets up to my chin, waiting for death to claim me. Wyn's talent became apparent early on, particularly her skills at healing magic. She was well liked by all her mentors and was recognized as an exceptionally gifted student. Even the Templars who watched her could not deny that she represented the best the circle had to offer. She was an intelligent young woman who possessed a quiet confidence and maturity beyond her years. She spent many years mentoring apprentices within the circle, and her peers thought so highly of her that she was asked to be First Enchanter Irving's successor, but she refused, saying that she had no desire to work in the upper echelons. When word reached the tower of King Caelan's call to arms, Wyn volunteered to go to Ostagar. Books and Songs. The History of the Chantry, Chapter 1. The first blight devastated the Tevinter Imperium. Not only had the Darkspawn ravaged the countryside, but Tevinter citizens had to face the fact that their own gods had turned against them. Dumat, the old god once known as the Dragon of Silence, had risen to silence the world, and despite the frenzied pleas for help, the other old gods did nothing. The people of the Imperium began to question their faith, murdering priests and burning temples to punish their gods for not returning to help. In those days, even after the devastation of the first blight, the Imperium stretched across the known world. Fringed with barbarian tribes, the Imperium was well prepared for invasions and attacks from without. Fitting, then, that the story of its downfall begins from within. The people of the far northern and eastern reaches of the Imperium rose up against their powerful overlords in rebellion. The Tevinter Magisters summoned demons to put down these small rebellions, leaving corpses to burn as examples to all who would dare revolt. The Imperium began to tear itself apart from within. Throngs of angry and disillusioned citizens, doing what centuries of opposing armies could not. But the Magisters were confident in their power, and they could not imagine surviving a blight only to be destroyed by their own subjects. Even after the blight, Tevinter commanded an army larger than that of any other organized nation in Thedas, but that army was scattered and its morale dwindling. The ruin of Tevinter was such that the Alamari barbarians, who had spread their clans and holds over the wilderness of the Ferelden Valley at the far southeast edge of the Imperium, saw weakness in their enemy, and, after an age of oppression, embarked on a campaign not only to free their own lands, but to bring down mighty Tevinter as well. The leaders of that blessed campaign were the great barbarian warlord Mafarath and his wife Andraste. Their dreams and ambitions would change the world forever. From Tales of Destruction of Thedas by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Quest related: A Pinch of Ashes, torn from a book on local myths and legends. The Korcari Wilds are rife with legends and myths that have amazed and confounded scholars since the fall of Ostagar in ancient times. One such mystery lies behind the tale of Astia and Nebunar, two young lovers who lived in Ostagar. The legend says that Astia grew up in the company of Gazarath, a spirit of the earth bound to an overhang on the bank of a lake in the Korcari Wilds. Gazarath began to fancy her, and they spent much of their days together, talking and laughing. Over the years, however, Astia became a woman and began to seek the company of men. When Astia met Nebunar, the two fell in love, and Astia hoped to bring her lover to see her spirit friend. But the spirit, angered and jealous, bade her begone. Gazarath told her that she would never see it again until she brought her lover's ashes and sprinkled them over their spot. Astia was horrified, and she fled from the enraged spirit. But she began to miss Gazarath, and on the day Nebunar asked her to marry him, she cut her beloved's throat, burned him, and brought his ashes to Gazarath, knowing that their marriage would forever sever her ties to her dear spirit friend. There are legends among the chastened that Gazarath still haunts that lake, and that those who sprinkle the ashes of the deceased over the right spot can summon the spirit. In memory of the contract with its beloved Astia, Gazarath will grant a single wish and then vanish, never to be heard from again. A note is scribbled in the margin beneath the page. Marcus, I think it's real. If you take the ashes I gave you and scatter them over a pile of rocks on an overhang overlooking the half-sunken Tevinter dome, maybe Gazareth will appear and give you a wish. If the battle takes you there, I think it's worth a try. Signs of the Chastened. The chastened barbarians are nothing if not clever. They have hidden markers and signs in the arrangements of stones and rubble along the paths of the wilds. In this way, they mark trails, note places of interest, and even give warnings in a way that outsiders cannot understand. Interestingly, these markers look indistinguishable from a regular pile of stones. I have dedicated my time to deciphering these signs, and I believe I am close to a breakthrough. The trail markers seem to point to a hoard or a location used for secret storage among the chastened. I have only found a portion of the message, however. I think that if I could find the complete message, find all of the trail markers, I can find this cache and see what treasure the chastened have to hide. I have found one such marker near this camp, under a fallen tree leaning against the ruins. Each marker seems to point to one or two others. I hear rumors that a darkspawn horde is coming. I hope I can find this treasure before it is too late. An excerpt from Rigby's Field Journal. Alright, for the codexes that we picked up in Lothering, starting under Creatures. Bear. No beast is more beloved by Dirthamen than the bear. When the world was new, Dirthamen gave one secret to each creature to keep. The foxes traded their secrets to Andril for wings. The hares shouted theirs to the treetops. The birds sold theirs for gold and silver. Only the bears kept Dirthamen's gift. Deep within their dens, they slept the months away in the company of their secrets and nothing else. When Dirthamen discovered what had been done with his gifts, he snatched the wings from the foxes, silenced the voices of the hares, and turned the birds into paupers. But the bears he honored for their steadfastness. Transcribed from a Dalish tale, 9-8 Dragon. Normally, it is almost unheard of for bears to attack travelers. They are, in fact, so shy and so inactive during the day that most people never encounter a bear at all. However, should a bear be provoked, they are remarkably dangerous. The normally placid-seeming creatures become enraged and can strike massive blows with their paws capable of knocking a man off his feet. Magic and Religion. The Maker. There was no word for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word, and his word became all that might be, dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. And from it made his firstborn. And he said to them, In my image I forge you. To you I give dominion over all that exists. By your will may all things be done. Then, in the center of heaven, he called forth a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelt, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne and sang hymns of praise unending. But their songs were the songs of the cobblestones. They shone with the golden light reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew on their own. And the voice of the Maker shook the fade, saying, In my image I have wrought my firstborn. You have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will all things are done, yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever-changing. And he knew he had wrought amiss. So the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took from the fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, Here I decree opposition in all things, for earth, sky, for winter, summer, for darkness, light. By my will alone is balance sundered, and the world given new life. And no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. At last did the Maker from the living world make men, immutable as the substance of the earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, To you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the fade I crafted you, and to the fade you shall return, each night in dreams, that you may always remember me. And then the Maker sealed the gates of the golden city, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. Thrinities 5:1-8. The Imperial Chantry. There are those who would tell you that the chantry is the same everywhere, as it is here, that the divine in Val Royeaux reigns supreme in the eyes of the Maker, and that this fact is unquestionable throughout Thedas. Do not believe it. The Maker's second commandment, magic must serve man, not rule over him, never held the same meaning within the ancient Tevinter Imperium as it did elsewhere. The chantry there interpreted the rule as meaning that mages should never control the minds of other men, and that otherwise their magic should benefit the rulers of men as much as possible. When the clerics of Tevinter altered the chant of light to reflect this interpretation of the commandment, the divine in Val Royeaux ordered the clerics to revert to the original chant. They refused, claiming corruption within Val Royeaux, an argument that grew until, in 487 Towers, the chantry in Tevinter elected its own legitimate and uncorrupted divine Valhale, who was not only male, but also happened to be one of the most prominent members of the Tevinter Circle of Magi. This black divine was reviled outside Tevinter, his existence an offense to the chantry in Val Royeaux. After 4 exalted marches to dislodge these rebels, all that the chantry in Val Royeaux accomplished was to cement the separation. While most aspects of the imperial chantry's teachings are the same, prohibitions against magic have been weakened and male priests have become more prevalent. The Circle of the Magi today rules Tevinter directly, ever since the Archon Nomoran was elected in 734 Storm directly from the ranks of the enchanters, to great applause from the public. He dispensed with the old rules forbidding mages from taking part in politics, and within a century the true rulers within the various imperial houses, the mages, took their places openly within the government. The imperial divine is now always drawn from the ranks of the first enchanters and operates as divine and grand enchanter both. This is utter heresy to any member of the chantry outside of Tevinter, a return to the days of the magisters which brought the blights down upon us. But it exists, and even though we have left the Tevinter Imperium to the mercies of the dread Korcari, still they have endured. Further confrontation between the Black Divine and our so-called White Divine is inevitable. From Edicts of the Black Divine, by Father David of Quirinus, 811 Blessed. The Sacred Ashes of Andraste. Only one person witnessed Maferath's betrayal, Havard the Aegis. A childhood friend of Maferath, he accompanied his chief to the meeting with the Tevinters, not realizing what was planned. When he understood that Maferath was giving Andraste over to be executed, Havard, unwilling to draw swords against his friend and liege, placed himself between Andraste and the Tevinter soldiers. The Tevinters struck him down, and Maferath left him for dead. Gravely wounded, Havard made his way to the gates of Minrathous to stop the execution. When he reached it, the terrible deed was already done. The armies on the plains long since dispersed. Havard, cursing his weakness, gathered the earthly remains of Andraste that had been left to the wind and rain, and wept. When his fingers touched the pile of ash, his ears filled with song, and he saw before him a vision of Andraste, dressed in cloth made of starlight. She knelt at his side, saying, "The Maker shall never forget you so long as I remember." The song faded and the vision with it, and Havard was alone, but his wounds were healed. With new strength, Havard took up the ashes of Our Lady and bore them back to the lands of the Alamari. Fearing that Maferath's supporters would defile them, Havard took the ashes of Andraste to a secluded place high in the mountains, and there he carved from the living rock an urn to hold them. Time passed, and the whereabouts of the urn faded from memory. Perhaps it was the Maker's will that only the most worthy should find his beloved's final resting place. Now we have only the legends such as that of the Chevalier Lothair, who quested to find the urn and save his dying daughter, and either found it in time to cure her or returned 100 years after her death. The ballads end less than certain on that point. From Thetis, Myths and Legends by Brother Genetivi. Culture and History. The Chastened. The chastened Wilders have lived in the Korcari Wilds since the first wars with the Alamari drove them southward a millennia ago. According to their own lore, they have always been a forest-dwelling people that adapt quickly to their new home. Game and fish are plentiful in the wetlands, and the chastened thrived. For a time, they and the hill-dwelling Avars were true threats to the northern lowlands. The Tevinter Imperium had arrived and was hard-pressed to keep back the waves of invasions from the south and the west. The fortress of Ostagar was built specifically to watch for chastened hordes venturing north of the tree line. It was not until the legendary warrior Hafter soundly defeated the chastened in the first half of the Divine Age that the question of their ability to contest the lowlands was settled permanently. Today the chastened are considered largely peaceful, though their ways are still primitive compared to our own. In the Korcari Wilds, they live in strange-looking huts built on stilts or even built into the great treetops. They paint their faces and are split into small tribes ruled by shamans, like those amongst the Avars. There are many tales of these shamans having learned their magic from the witches of the wilds. Witches that inspired as much terror as they do awe and gratitude, even if there is no definitive proof they exist. In particular, the tale of Flemeth, the greatest witch of the wilds, is celebrated amongst all tribes. While there is no way to know how many there are in the wilds today, few travelers that pass through the forest tell of chastened eking out an existence even in the frozen wastelands of the far south. One can assume that should the chastened ever organize themselves once more, we might have reason to fear them here in Ferelden. We ignore them at our peril. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Lothering. In ancient times, Lothering was little more than a trading post that served the fortress of Ostagar to the south. Nowadays it is larger, serving Redcliffe and the community of merchants and surface dwarves near Orzammar. Its location on the North Road gives it strategic value, so control of Lothering has historically been a matter of contention between the southern Banorn and the Southreach Arling. King Calenhad himself stepped in and awarded the town to Southreach in the Exalted Age, which has largely ended the feud, or at least the appearance of it. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Characters. Liliana. In the cloisters, away from the fuss and the flurry of the cities, I found peace, and in that stillness I could hear the Maker. A lay sister of the Chantry who can beat the stuffing out of trained mercenaries would be notable enough, but one who also claims to have been sent to fight the Darkspawn by the Maker himself is unusual, to say the least. She joined Alistair and Mina in Lothering, insisting that she would prove useful. Sten. Either you have an enviable memory or a pitiable life, to know nothing of regret. The northern islands are remote, lush jungles that harbor cities rumored to be the most extraordinary ever built. These are the lands of the Korcari, lands that no foreign eyes ever see. Only the stories of the 3 exalted marches waged against the giants have reached the south, until the arrival of Sten. The stoic giant in the cage was surely the strangest thing the people of Lothering had ever seen, until the blight struck. Books and Songs. The First Blight, Chapter 1. Thedas is a land of fierce diversity, from the assassin princes of Antiva to the fated griffins of the Anderfels, but in my travels I have found one tale that unites the people of this land. It is a story of pride and damnation, and although the telling differs, the essence of the tale remains the same. At the height of its power, the Tevinter Imperium stretched over much of Thedas, uniting the known world under the rule of the tyrannical Magisters. It is said that the old gods whom the Magisters worshipped gave them the knowledge of blood magic, and the Magisters used this forbidden power to cement their rule. The blood of elven slaves and humans alike ran down imperial altars to fuel Magisters' greed, and tales of their excesses so horrifying that one can only be grateful that blood magic is prohibited today. But all that stands tall must eventually fall. Perhaps they foresaw their ruin, or perhaps their pride knew no bounds. But whatever the reason, the Magisters dared to open a magical portal into the Golden City at the heart of the Fade. They sought to usurp the Maker's throne, long left unattended in the Golden City after the Maker turned his back on his creations. They would storm heaven itself with their power and become as gods. This is what the Chantry, in its oft-exercised tendency to understate, refers to as the second sin. According to most versions of the tale, the Magisters did indeed reach the Golden City and walked into the home of the Maker, where no living being before them had dared or been able to tread. But humanity is not meant to walk in heaven. The Magisters were wicked with pride and other sins, and their presence tainted the Golden City. What once was a perfect, holy citadel became a twisted home of darkness and nightmares. The Magisters were expelled back through their gateway and cursed for their treachery. As the Golden City had been tainted, so were the Magisters twisted and transformed into things of darkness, the very first of the Darkspawn. The Golden City, once a shining beacon at the heart of the Fade, became the Black City, a remainder of all that man's pride has cost. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Genetivi, Chantry Scholar. Quest-related. Maleficarum regrets. I won't go back. Let them hunt and dread finding me. But you, Melis, should not live this life. It would please me if you found a life in the Circle Tower. I left a few things there, mostly stolen from the enchanters. Sell them to fund a new path. The cache is in the study area, middle alcove. Goodbye, Belgruce.